Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to zoom in on a tiny slice of land that has some absolutely huge implications. It's a place that's really reshaping how Europe thinks about security, supply chains, and even just doing business. So let me start by asking you a question. What do you think is NATO's most critical 65 kilometers? I mean, it's a stretch of land you've probably never heard of. It doesn't really grab the headlines, but believe me, it quietly shapes the military and economic strategy for an entire continent. Well, that's it right there, the Suwalki Gap. It's this land corridor, only about 65 to 100 kilometers wide, and it's the only land bridge connecting the Baltic states to the rest of their NATO allies. And here's the crucial part. It's literally pinched between Russia's heavily armed territory of Kaliningrad on one side and its very close ally, Belarus, on the other. All right, so to really get why this little strip of land is such a big deal for everything from defense to daily commerce, we've got to start with the map. We have to understand the unique and, frankly, very challenging geography of the area. Now, this is a fantastic way to think about it. You've heard of maritime choke points like the Strait of Hormuz, right? Where all the oil tankers have to pass. Well, think of the Suwalki Gap as the land-based version of that. It's a natural bottleneck where geography funnels everything, trucks, trains, and troops, into this one narrow, controllable channel. And this really paints the picture of the strategic pressure on that bottleneck, doesn't it? From the west, you've got Kaliningrad, a Russian outpost just packed with advanced weapons like Iskander missiles. Then from the east, you have Belarus, which basically acts as a forward base for Russian forces. You see how together they create this powerful pincer, just squeezing the gap from both sides. And let's just let that number sink in again. 65 to 100 kilometers. That's all that separates these two heavily militarized zones. That single geographic fact is the foundation for pretty much every strategic and economic calculation we're going to talk about. This quote from our source material just hits the nail on the head. If this corridor were ever blocked or controlled by an adversary, it would, in one move, cut off 3 NATO allies by land. They'd be completely dependent on much riskier sea and air routes for any kind of help or supplies. Okay, so that's the vulnerability, but this isn't just a doom and gloom story. Far from it. NATO and its allies are being incredibly proactive here. So let's dive into the concrete steps they're taking to, harden this corridor. So on this southern flank of the gap, you have Poland. And they've launched this massive program called East Shield. And when I say massive, I mean it's a multi-billion-dollar effort over several years. We're talking physical fortifications, state-of-the-art anti-drone systems, and, this part's really smart, dispersed logistics hubs to make sure supplies can't be taken out in one hit. Meanwhile, just to the north, Lithuania is not sitting still either. A huge piece of their plan is a new €100 million training ground for a whole brigade. And get this, they're building it right inside the gap itself. That's no accident. It's about putting military readiness right where it matters most. So what's the big idea behind all of this? Well, it's actually pretty straightforward. The goal isn't to start a fight, it's to prevent one. It's all about making any potential attack so difficult and so costly that it just becomes an incredibly bad idea. It's pure deterrence through preparation. But here's where this story, for me at least, gets even more interesting. The ripples from the Suwalki Gap spread way beyond military planners. This is now a critical factor for global supply chains and for how businesses think about risk. Just think about the domino effect for a second. Let's say there's any kind of disruption in that corridor. Not even a war, just heightened tension. Boom, the land routes are immediately severed. All those commercial trucks and trains have to find another way around, which means delays and higher costs. The economic pain starts spreading way beyond that one little piece of land. And because of that, you can bet businesses are paying close attention. They're actually talking about something called Suwalki risk in their boardrooms. And this means they're actively looking for different transport routes, they're holding more inventory just in case, and they're even investing in what's called dual-use infrastructure, things that help their business but could also help the military in a crisis. And this risk is actually sparking some massive long-term infrastructure projects. You've got Rail Baltica, which is this huge project to build a modern rail line connecting the Baltics to the rest of Europe. Then there's the Via Baltica Highway, which is getting major upgrades. And these aren't just commercial projects. They are explicitly designed to move military equipment just as easily as they move commercial goods.
So when you pull the lens back, what you're really seeing is this tiny little geographic problem acting as a massive catalyst. It's forcing a whole new way of thinking about security, one that's built on a foundation of modern, tough, resilient infrastructure.
And this chart just shows it perfectly. Real resilience, real security. It's not just about tanks and fences anymore. It's a whole cocktail of things. It's about diversifying your supply chains, making sure your energy supply is secure, having digital backups. All of it has to work together to create a system that can take a punch. So here's the bottom line. The Suwalki Gap has become way more than just a military choke point. It's a real-world stress test that's forcing a much-needed, much wider conversation about how Europe secures its most critical supply lines for a new and much more uncertain era.
And that kind of leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on, doesn't it? In the world we live in now, where a disruption to a supply chain can be just as damaging as a battle, maybe the true measure of a nation's strength isn't just its army, but how strong and adaptable its supply chains are. Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.